You're listening to the Balanced Educator Podcast, episode number 167.
Welcome to the Balanced Educator. We're your hosts, Kaylee
and Josiane from EduCalm. Our intention is to equip and empower you to feel more calm, balanced, and joyful in all aspects of your life. Hello, and welcome to the Balanced Educator Podcast. Today, we are chatting with Grace Stevens all about feeling less stressed as teachers and more empowered. This is a perfect episode to listen to in the first few months of the school year to set yourself up for success. So it's not by accident that we chose this topic today. A former corporate girl, Grace quit VP Life to pursue her dream job as a public school teacher. After 20 years in the classroom, she focuses full-time on helping educators have a more positive teaching experience. Grace combines her signature mantra, "Your energy teaches more than your lesson plans," with 2 decades of study in behavioral therapy and positive psychology to create science-based habits for overwhelmed educators. She has authored 3 books on teaching, including the best-selling Positive Mindset Habits for Teachers and the One New Habit book series. We are so excited to dive into this episode on the 5 habits of the least stressed and most empowered educators. But before we dive in, we are excited to share this week's sponsor with you.
Do you want to incorporate social-emotional learning and mindfulness into your classroom to support students with mental health, focus, self-regulation, and emotional intelligence? With so much on your plate as a teacher, you probably just don't have time to get trained, develop resources, and teach the lessons yourself. Plus, you need time for self-care too. That's why we developed EduCalm, to support teachers like you. EduCalm is a fully bilingual English and French co-regulation program created by teachers. This program provides everything you'll need to build self-regulation, mindfulness, and social-emotional skills with your students through a 5-minute daily practice. With EduCalm, you don't have to be the expert. Just log in, press play, and participate with your students as you all prepare your minds and bodies for calm and focused teaching and learning together. Go to educalm.com to learn more and start using our free resources. Again, that's educalm.com, spelled EduCalme.
All right, let's get into this interview done by Kaylee with Grace Stevens.
Hello, Grace. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to chat with you today because I think we're going to get into a lot of topics that really align with our community and are going to be a great reminder for this part of the school year. So just to start off, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and let us know how life led you to where you are today?
Okay, we'll go with the short version of the origin story, but I am Grace Stevens, and currently I am a educational empowerment coach, which basically means I work with educators to help them feel more empowered to create a more positive experience for themselves. And I was a second career teacher. I was in the corporate world for 13 years, very successful in the corporate world, but really stressed. When I was a kid, I was the kid who used to play school with all the little dolls on the landing and do their homework, fix their homework. And I wanted to be a teacher. And then, life led me in a different direction because I thought I had to be practical and chase the money and chased all of that. And in my early 30s, realized I was miserable, even though I had met all the goals I had set for myself in the corporate world. And some of it was really very rewarding. But when I had a young family of my own and other things in my life that I felt were just not getting enough of me or the best of me, I decided I needed to make a change. So I decided, go back to school, which was no easy feat with 2 little children. and
I
become a
can't
teacher.
imagine.
Yeah, it was a lot. My family was very patient with me. But so I started teaching right at the beginning of the 2000s, and I loved it. It was magical. It was magical. It had purpose and it was fun and it came easy to me. And it allowed me to have time with my own children during the holidays. And like, I thought I had, won the golden ticket. What a wonderful career. And then all the things started coming back: stress, anxiety, overwhelmed, pulled in too many directions. Nobody gets enough of me. And just, the Sunday scaries starting earlier and earlier on a Sunday, right? Like, and putting my whole life on hold until the weekend or summer or, whatever. And I decided I didn't have another career change in me. Like, I can't change careers again. I decided I need to change myself. And so I went into this really big, deep dive into learning positive psychology, neuro-linguistic programming, all kinds of things. I had come from a background of a family that had, let's say, a constellation of mental health issues that were never discussed. And I had suffered so much from anxiety and depression and other things and just never articulated that. And so I really needed to do the work to fix that for myself. And so then what happened out of that was, I was still teaching and I learned how to have more productive habits and create joy for myself and reduce the stress. And then other people started to notice, like, I worked in a really small school. So it was one class per grade, right? So we all had the same kids. You have the same kids, you have the same parents, the same admins. And people would say, well, why is your experience so different than mine? And so I ended up writing a book called Positive Mindset Habits for Teachers. And I tried to encapsulate into a set of habits the things that I knew were intentional that I did to keep myself from feeling overwhelmed. And it wasn't, a straight path. It's not like a happy ever after story, right? Like, I fixed it for myself then. And then, I changed schools 17 years later and again was, under the desk in the fetal position crying. Like, we all been there, right? So
we've all been there.
It's not like I got out of it and I was perfect. Like, it's kind of, it takes constant vigilance and attention to stay out of that place. But anyway, so I wrote the book. I carried on teaching. I had promised myself I would be a public servant for 20 years, which I did. And then now in the last year, I've dedicated myself full time to helping teachers. I really felt like I could have more impact that way. I'm sure Canada, the United States, huge turnover with teachers right now, really a teacher shortage. And I realistically only had maybe another 3 or 4 years in the classroom. And I thought my impact can be greater if I help teachers and they could in turn impact their students. So that's kind of how I got here.
What a great way to sort of end your career. You served students for so long and now you're serving teachers. That's so cool.
Yeah.
A couple things stood out to me with your story that I think are really interesting. And one is how you felt burnout from your first career and then switched over to teaching. I think a lot of teachers start out in teaching and then we have that high attrition rate where like 30% of teachers in Canada are leaving the profession in the first 5 years. It's just this slam of overwhelm and burnout that you aren't expecting, because most of us get into the career because we're like your story, we were playing teacher when we were kids. It was something we always wanted to do. We felt that call to be in service to kids and help them grow. And then you get into the classroom and you realize this isn't just about connecting with my students. There's so much more and it's so overwhelming. And you kind of had that experience of like, wherever you go, there you are, those same problems were popping up. It's very similar for myself. I started out as a teacher. I made a career shift into teaching yoga for a little bit. And then eventually that led to starting business with Josiane Educom, supporting teachers and students in the classroom, but while also going back to teaching. But I saw that it was like, I thought the answer was leaving the classroom, and then realized that I was doing the exact same things while starting my own business, even though it was in a mindfulness field.
Yeah,
I was doing the exact same things I did as a teacher. I was just putting too much on my plate, not knowing when or how to say no.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that your story is kind of the reverse of many teachers.
Well, yeah. And I feel like, it's the work of a lifetime, isn't it, really? Because, yeah, we create, teaching. I remember years and years ago, I saw a 60 Minutes, it was a news show, and I can't remember what the episode was, but I remember the interviewer said, teachers work harder than you, whatever you do. Like the reporter had spent this whole day with a teacher and was like, so yeah, let's be honest, it's a very stressful position. But, I was in the corporate world. That was really stressful too. Dropping my kids off at daycare, going to an airport, getting on a plane, doing a presentation, trying to rush back. It was craziness, right? So there is this part of you that, you got to look internally because you're creating the circumstances. And yes, you can go to a new classroom, to a new school, to a new district, and you're going to create the same circumstances if you're not vigilant. Of course, there's going to be outside factors. But as a general rule, if you're a person who, and many of us are helpers, fixers, pleasers, conflict avoidant. We're going to go overcommit. We're not going to set healthy boundaries. We're going to burn ourselves out, right? And so it doesn't matter if we're doing that in the classroom or the boardroom. We're still going to do it. So I like to say the answer is you. We got to kind of fix ourselves. And so a lot of the things that I teach are really about that. Is control what you can control and be mindful what your piece is of it, and not to minimize the challenge. The challenges in education right now, they're crazy. It's so different now from when I started teaching 20 years ago. And so, and it's only getting more and more complex and more things being thrown at us. So yes, it is challenging, but at the same time, the piece we can control is how do we approach it. And so that's what I really appreciate about your work too, because I did the same. I tried to teach my students the same skills. Look, when all this is going on, you can be calm.
Yes.
You can control what you can control. You can have your own narrative. You don't need to get caught up in, everything else. So it's kind of all part of the same thing. But it did lead me here, and I am grateful for that. Although people are like, what's a teacher empowerment coach? I made the title up. I don't know what else to say. I'm not like a cheerleader. I'm not a therapist, but I have a lot of kind of nerdy qualifications, and I like to coach teachers. I like to say, nobody can save you. Not even I can save you, but I will teach you how to save yourself.
And that's so important right now. Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
As you said, things are getting more complex for teachers. There's more and more thrown at us. And so I think it's more important than ever before that we learn these skills of setting boundaries, being empowered to follow our own values as teachers in the classroom, even though, we're feeling like we need to teach all the things on top of the curriculum and follow all the rules. But at the end of the day, you as a teacher have something really important to bring to the lives of your students. And that is based in your own values and your own experiences. Like you said, you learned something through your career for how to support yourself, no matter what your circumstances. And you started to teach that to your students. The same was true for us. We turned to mindfulness when our lives were feeling out of control, and mindfulness was a huge important tool for us. And so we decided to share it with our students, even though that didn't necessarily fit into the curriculum, but we found ways to create habits in the classroom.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. You talk a lot. You have many books. Congratulations on all the books that you've written. And a recurring theme that I'm seeing is habits. You're talking about habits. Why is that a theme that you're focusing so much on?
Okay, so habits, because, I touched on briefly that I came from this background of a family that had significant mental health issues, never discussed, never talked about. And to be honest, I felt a lot of my life that I was being stalked by a breakdown. I'm one bad thing away from losing my stuff, right? And I really dove into the research, and I looked at like, okay, so a huge part of my family have diabetes. Okay, so I have a predisposition for it, type 2. But there's lifestyle choices I can make. And it turned out it was the same with mental health, right? So when I looked at the research, 50% of your, what we call a happiness quotient, your baseline, kind of you optimistic, a glass full, a glass empty, like half of that is predetermined. Okay. So that's 50% of it. 10% of it, which I was really skeptical at first, but I really did look at the research, only 10% of it is actually your circumstances. Right.
Wow.
So you would like to think that, that new pair of shoes or, that new job, that new career will like make you happy, and it will for a certain amount of time. But then, we have all the things, hedonic adaptation, all the things, right? So 10% is your circumstances. 50% is your baseline, right? That leaves 40%. And that 40% that determines your day-to-day happiness quotient is based on intentional habits. And so you can make new neural pathways in your brain, right? Just like you can make your growth mindset, intelligence isn't fixed. Neither is happiness and optimism fixed. You can make new pathways. But in order to do that, it isn't a one and done. You can't teach a kid to, starfish breathing one time and feel like they're done. Like, I sat on my, I listened to my little audio for 10 minutes, my guided meditation, and I'm enlightened, right? No, there's no way. It's a habit. And so that's why I focused on habits, small things that you could incorporate into your day every day that just supported making new pathways. I like to talk about being a joy detective. With the kids, we teach them here to, look for text evidence, be a detective. And so I like to teach kids to let's be a joy detective. Let's look for things that are fascinating and interesting and make us happy. We have a joy jar in class when something good happens and a kid says, Miss, put it in the joy jar. Like you kind of set your antenna to look for the good stuff. And, so that's why I focus on the habits, because that's the piece you can control. You can't control what your biology is. And a lot of times you can't control your circumstances. I mean, not the global circumstances for sure. Nobody had control over, COVID or, any of those things that have been so stressful the last few years. But your habits, you can control.
So I love that.
Right.
That's aligned so well with how we teach of creating in the classroom positive mental health habits, that it becomes a routine. Yeah. It's not an overwhelming thing. It's just a small routine that you're implementing every single day so that you're creating those neural pathways for mindfulness, for joy, for calm, for using a breathing strategy when you're feeling overwhelmed. Those things are skills that get taught over time. As you said, you can't just listen to one mindfulness audio once and then have that change your life. It's just this little practice over and over and over and over again. Yeah, that ends up shifting how you respond to life. So that's really cool. Okay, I love your tagline on your website. You say your energy teaches more than your lesson plans. I just feel like that is so well said. Can we chat about that?
Sure. So I'm a little, so when I started writing, I wrote Positive Mindset Habits for Teachers in 2015. But actually before that, about 7 years before, I had written a book called The Happy Habit. And it was before I focused on making these habits more relevant to teaching. But at that time, like it seemed a little woo-woo to people. You know what I'm saying? Like Carol Dweck hadn't done her growth mindset yet and all that. And people were like, really? Be happy first? Like kind of. And so I wouldn't call myself woo-woo. I'd say I'm a little bit, woo-woo adjacent. But I'm a really big kind of like, you don't even need to be a teacher to know that's true. You just needed to be a kid. Your energy teaches more than your lesson plans. You think back to your favorite teacher, right? They were happy. They were excited to be there, But the teacher that I loved the most, she didn't have, I remember everything she taught me that year because I was engaged and excited, but I don't remember that she had, amazing decor in the room or like perfect everything, but she was there and she wanted us to learn and you knew that. And she was excited about teaching us. And that was just that energy that exuded from her. And then, the year later, I had a different teacher, and I couldn't even tell you one thing I learned that year. It was just a miserable experience. Or, she was resentful. She was kind of picked on kids. It was just this horrible cycle of like kids would misbehave and wind her up, and then she'd be horrible, and then they'd misbehave more, right? And it was just a totally different experience. So I really feel like your energy speaks more than your lesson plan. So that's your number one priority, is do what it takes to show up as your best self. And not everyone's going to be the best self every day. But if you've invested in classroom community and showing up as your best self on the days when you're not your very best self, you will know that students will bend over backwards to give you grace and help you out and not act up for you. And it really just is this kind of vibe in a classroom where people are cooperative and collaborative, and they want to learn, and they feel valued and safe and free to make mistakes and all those things. And that is an energy and a vibe that doesn't come from, your scripted curriculum that you're on page 4 on the same day as your teammate or whatever. So that, for me, is where it all starts. Your energy.
I love that. All right. Now let's get into, you have 5 habits of the least stressed, most empowered educators. I'd love to go through those so that our listeners can head into the classroom knowing which 5 habits they can focus on to improve that energy that they're bringing to the classroom.
All right. So these are kind of overarching. They're actually mindset habits. So they're kind of big and broad, and within that there are tiny little things that they can do. But I feel like, I listen to your podcasts and your guests, like I feel like the actual nuts and bolts of do this strategy or this or that, like you have enough of those in your tool belt. We can talk about a few, but they're kind of the overarching 5 mindsets. So the first one is really being proactive versus reactive, right? Just living by design, not by default. Like, I just did a whole big presentation for some educators last week who were going to go back to school pretty soon. And I wanted to tell them, don't wait for this year to be different or better. It's not going to be. Stop waiting for the perfect class. It doesn't exist, right? You've got to be intentional, and you've got to have attention and intention, and you can't just expect, this year it will be better, this year there'll be less thrown at me, this year. No, you've got to do something about it. So take control of the piece you can control. And so what I encourage educators to do, and I've done it with kids as little as kinder, we did it with hula hoops, and all the way up to high school, doing a circle of influence and a circle of control. And I'm sure that most people know what that is, right? That you draw your circle of all the things that you're concerned about. And then in the middle, you put all the things you have control over. And the more you focus on what you can control, right, all the other concerns get less and less, right? So I'm sure most people are kind of familiar with that concept. And it's a basic concept. It's actually the first concept I ever learned about with any kind of professional development, like 30-something years ago, is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Book blew my mind, right? Being, having paradigm shifts and really just focus on what you can control, right? The state test is coming up. Do we have any control that they give a state test? No. You might feel mad about it, angry about it, frustrated about it. It's ridiculous. You might have all these things. But what can you control? I can teach the kids how to use their breathing strategies if they start to feel overwhelmed, right?
And be proactive with it. So making it a habit of doing it every day, not waiting for them.
Exactly. Not just, we're going to learn this strategy now. Like, we've done it all year, right? But I can have my, work on them with positive affirmations that I've been working all year. Like, focus on your effort, not on the grade, like all the things. So you don't do it the day before the test, but you're building it in all year, and it helps you have more control. So that's kind of mindset habit number 1, is like, live by design, not by default. Just don't wait for something to get better. Like, take responsibility.
Love that. Proactive, not reactive. So that's right. What is our mindset number 2?
Mindset number 2 is really redefine balance. So I feel like balance, like, oh, I want to balance my life, work and school life balance. There's not going to be balance. There's going to be integration. There's going to be harmony, but don't expect, there's no perfect planner. There's no sheet that I can give you. You need to redefine it for yourself. And this is how I look at it. It was this wonderful analogy I heard Brian Dyson, CEO of Coca-Cola, at a commencement street. He talked about, you know how teachers, we always say, oh, keep all the balls in the air. And he said, you don't keep all the balls in the air. You decide which balls are glass, right? And which are rubber, right?
Yes.
So
which is what's really important to me and what is worth letting slide. So I have the time and space and energy for the things that are important to me.
Exactly.
Knowing your values
just
is
roll
so important.
away. Nothing's going to break if it rolls away. Pick it up later, or just let it go in the gutter if it's not that important. So that's really redefining that and understanding that it's going to change. All the time. And so you need to kind of, again, be proactive about taking a view of the year. Like, where do I know there's going to be more glass balls at school? You know, the end of a grading period or parent conferences or whatever. Where do I know there's going to be more glass balls at home when kids have activity, sports or whatever, right? And so really just having this mindset that it's okay to let some things go and be intentional. I always tell people to be intentional about their not to-do list. Yes. Everybody makes a to-do list. No, make a not to-do list. Like, just make peace with the fact it's not going to get done. And either, be an adult and kind of, push back, set a boundary, tell somebody I'm unable to do that or whatever, but not to just guilt yourself into trying to keep it all in the air. Because when you're trying to keep it all in the air, inevitably you end up dropping everything. And the one ball that will always get dropped is your own self-care. And once you self-care, authentic self-care, not just, bubble bath, pedicure, beautiful, not true authentic self-care, right? Once your true authentic self-care has dropped, you are no good to anybody and will go back to number one. Your energy teaches more than your lesson plans. And there is nothing worse, having raised my own children while I was a teacher and for many years a single parent, there's nothing worse than that guilt that when you come home, you have given so much of yourself to other people's children. You have nothing left to give your own, right? You're crabby, you're impatient. God, the year that my son and I were both in first grade, him in it and me teaching it, I can't tell you, I did not want to see that stupid phonics page when I got home. Like, it was probably 5 minutes worth of homework, but it was a trigger for me. Like, I didn't stay in this all day, right? Like, so it's just, you don't want to drop that piece that is proactively taking care of yourself, because then you can't take care of anybody else. So that's number 2. So number 1 was really focus on what you can control. Number 2, redefine balance. Number 3, we talked a little bit about is becoming a joy detective. So we talked about that a little bit, right? How can you set up routines for yourself and for your students to look for the good stuff, right? We know the way that the brain works is it's a pattern seeking, thing. There's so much input that comes in that we got to kind of, we set our own filters, right? It's kind of like tuning in a radio station, right? So are you like tuned into like, life stinks and then you die? Or are you tuned into like, ooh, miracles everywhere, right? So just a few of the habits, which I'm sure people are aware of, but they sometimes don't realize how powerful they can be. And one of them is gratitude, having some kind of practice for gratitude. One of the simple things, like I said, that I used to do in the classroom was have a joy jar, or even a simple exit ticket at the end of the day. Not every day. Some days it was based on what we learned, but sometimes the exit ticket was like, tell me one radical thing that happened today, like something awesome that happened today, or something you're super excited about. And I don't care if it was, pizza for lunch tomorrow, but just to get kids thinking that way. And myself, I found something really powerful for me was to have a closing ritual. And the closing ritual I had was when I packed up my desk and, put everything away. I wanted this, pattern interrupt to tell myself, okay, this is the end of the day now. I'm separating school from home. And so one of my closing rituals was to write down the best 3 things that happened that day. And so, of course, during the day, then now my brain is, oh, is this it? Is this it? Is this going to make it to the top 3? Is this going to make it to the top 3? So that was number 1 thing. Number 2 thing was, then it was top of mind when I got home and somebody would say, how was your day? Instead of, ragging on the parent or whatever, like, oh, these 3 things happen, right? So those are things that people are used to, but making them habits. Look for joy every time before I left the classroom. Leave the classroom, go to the office. Sometimes it was like running the gauntlet, right? You had to avoid the negative people, or the kids who wanted this, or somebody was going to ask you to do something. I would just say, I'm going to look for 5 things I like and I'm going to find them. And that was it. When I walked across the playground, I would just, the butterfly, or the kid who was helping the other kid tie his shoelaces, or you could hear the girls laughing, whatever. Just keep setting that radar, looking for the clues. Where's the good stuff? Look for the clues, look for the good stuff, right? So that's habit number 3. Habit number 4, we also touched on this a little bit. Create your own teacher narrative. Other people's experience doesn't need to be your experience. And, as we know, the collective narrative in education right now, for a million valid reasons, is very negative, right? It's very negative. You look at, all the teacher memes, the teacher stories, right? The collective narrative is overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, not respected, not sustainable, behaviors totally dysregulated, only getting worse and worse, right? That's that narrative. Is it true? Absolutely. Does it need to be true in your little classroom where you're in charge of everything? No. I like to say when I close the door, I'm a revolutionary, right? Yeah. Like in my room, here's what we got going on. I have my compass, right? I know what I'm teaching. I know what's important. I think that was one of the benefits to me coming to education later in life, is I already had quite a bit of life experience and confidence. Never had an issue with parents not taking me seriously or kids not minding me. Like I just had that kind of air of confidence about me because I was older. Mm-hmm. Right? But at the same time, like, remember, you can really have your own experience. And that's with students too. We have a practice here in a lot of schools that at the end of the year, you fill out the cards about your students and give them to the teacher for next year. I never looked at those. I mean, I would scan in the corner to see if they needed special services, of course. But other than that, I don't want somebody else's experience of that child to dictate how I'm going to interact with them. Mm-hmm. Like my experience could be totally different, right? So that's the same with parents, with children, about everything. Other people's experience doesn't need to be your experience. I was new to a school and there was an admin there and people told me horror stories and watch your back and all these things. And I was starting to buy into it. Like, oh, he has it out for people and this and that. And I had to literally get a piece of paper and let me write down my experience of this person. And I went, and when I really challenged every interaction I'd ever had with him or anything that had happened, it was nothing but good stuff. Was he a little quirky? Yeah. Was he a stickler? Yes. Did I learn more from him that year than any other admin I'd had? Absolutely. But this whole experience of like, he's out to get you and this and that, it simply wasn't true. It was probably true for other people. I mean, I'm not invalidating other people's experiences. I'm just saying it's a really healthy habit to have your own experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And relationships are so different based on personalities and values, and, how a student behaves in one class has so much to do with the energy that teacher is bringing in, right? And then if you're bringing your own energy, you are automatically going to have different, maybe some similar, but different experiences because you're interacting with those students in different ways. So coming in with kind of like the intention of seeking out the good and kind of the expectation that, well, it is going to go well. And if something goes bad, we'll tune into that. We'll deal with that. But, if I'm coming in with the routines that are important to me, I'm bringing in the values, the energy that's important to me, then, things should go generally well, and we'll deal with the challenges as they arise.
It's like that teacher who, always in their mind says, these are my gifted kids. Like they just always tell themselves, these are my gifted kids, right? Mm-hmm. That's how I always approach it, because they do. They all have their own gifts.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, so that's number 4, and it leads right into mindset habit number 5, which is watch your mental diet. I got to be careful not to get in the soapbox. Because I'm going to say, I've had this sign on my desk for 30 years, and I'm telling you, my own kids, when they see it, roll their eyes. It says, your mind is the most fertile soil in the universe. Mind what you plant in it. Mm-hmm. Right? So that is directly correlated to having your own teacher narrative. So one of the most powerful quotes I ever read was by Albert Einstein, who said the most important decision, I like that you use the word decision, not attitude. The most important decision you ever have to make is whether you think you live in a friendly or a hostile universe. Mm-hmm. Right? So I want to live in a friendly universe. I really have that mindset that students, admins, parents, co-workers, everybody is doing the best they can with the skills they have in the situation they find themselves in. Right. And I can extend grace that way and receive grace that way. And it is hard to believe that kind of friendly universe if when our consumption of anything, whether it's gossip or media, podcast, TV, advertising, 24-hour news stream, doom scrolling, zombie scrolling, whatever you want to call it, is all, about true crime and be afraid and buy stuff. Because that's really what the message is in the collective narrative, right? It has an agenda. And so I really caution educators or anybody in my path, my children, go back to the eye rolling. We never had cable television when they were growing up. No, we don't do that. So just be mindful of what you are putting in. Do a quick audit, look at, what do I follow? What do I read? What do I do? Who do I listen to? Does that bring joy to my life? Does it help me feel like people are helpful and doing the best they can? Or is it doom and gloom? And is it biased? And is it really just contributing to my anxiety and in subtle ways? And so that's really the 5th habit, is to watch your mental diet. But as you've seen, they all kind of meld together, right? Yeah. So I'll go over them again for those of us who are. So number 1 was focus on what you can control, right? So live by design, not by default. Number 2 was, let's see what order I said them in. Number 2 was redefine balance, right? Whether it's a glass ball or whether it's the rubber ball, like be intentional about what you're not going to do. Make peace with the fact it's not all going to get done. Okay, that's number 1. It's not all going to get done, right? Yeah. And then learn some skills, level up your skills and setting boundaries and saying no in a way that's comfortable for you, student focused, professional. I mean, not to say like, it's not in my contract, like don't be that teacher, but there's ways to do it, right? And number 3, become a joy detective. Number 4, create your own teacher narrative. Yeah, be a revolutionary when you close the door. And number 5, watch your mental diet. So that's all sounds so simple, doesn't it? Not easy. Simple, but not easy. It is the work of a lifetime. And like I said at the beginning, there's a certain type of horrendous imposter syndrome that comes when you find, as I have many times, falling apart under the desk. Like, I know better. I teach this stuff, but like it takes vigilance. We get just like it's we talked about needing to create habits around them, but it's easy to slip back into old habits because the old habits are kind of what everybody else is doing. And you just kind of, sometimes you do have fear of missing out. If I'm not following the snarky teacher memes, Facebook page for a little while, I'm like, they're having jokes that I don't get in on. But, the kind of what it's doing to your subconscious is kind of subtle. So, anyway, so that's...
Well, these really are all habits that need to be set up. And otherwise, as you said, it just, I think one thing that came to mind for me was when you were talking about gratitude. That was also one of the first things I did to turn my mindset around in the classroom and make big changes for myself was that gratitude list. I did the exact same thing. I had in my agenda, I wrote 3 things like in my planner that I was grateful for at the end of every day. And that totally transformed things. But eventually if you fall out of that habit, you make your way back to the old mindsets. I would have always described myself as a positive person that saw the good in everything. But there's a difference between the positive version of myself where I'm intentionally creating gratitude as a habit versus my baseline. And my baseline, yes, is positive and generally looks for the good. But the joy that I get to infuse into my day with that tiny moment of selecting what am I grateful for today and going through my day looking for the positives, how that makes me feel, that boost of happiness is so important and creates momentum towards more positivity. So I think all of these 5 habits that you described are something that we have to consider. Okay, how am I going to actually put this into practice intentionally and not just let it be something that I'm like, oh yeah, I know I need to do that. It's like, I know I need to exercise, but if I don't actually exercise, it's not the same.
It's like, you can't that's like me. I ate 1 salad, and then like, hey, let me get on the scale. I'm like, it was 1 salad. Calm down. Right? No, so I actually made a journal, which was the first book I made for teachers, was a positive mindset journal. And it had 36 weeks of it, had the prompts every day, the 3, kind of perfect things. It had the fun, like quote of the week, how the kids say the really funny stuff. And then it had who can I champion this week? And that was, harking back to, I'm sure, Rita Pearson's beautiful TED talk, every child needs a champion. So to set that radar for like, especially that child who maybe is challenging, setting your radar, catch them doing something good. Like this parent never gets a phone call that's like hecka positive. Right? They see the school calling or they see you texting or whatever, and they're like, they need some good press. This kid needs some good press. Like, who can I champion this week? And so those were kind of some of the prompts, but I encourage people to keep it with your lesson planner. Like, just make it a habit. Like I said, a closing ritual. Put it like, I'm not going home till I log off my computer and I fill out those pages. And to think, like, before you go in the staff room, just think about real quick your morning, one good thing that happened, so that when you run into somebody and they're like, how was your day? You're not bringing up, the negative, right? Like it just takes intentionality, because, when you're focusing on that one kid who was totally dysregulated or was causing, was disrespectful or whatever, you really, you've just filtered out the other 24 that were doing exactly what they should be doing, right? And the 5 who were actually helping other students, like beautiful things happening. And you do have to deal with the one negative thing. It's not like you can just, stick your head in the sand, pretend it isn't happening. But when somebody asks you, how was your morning? Don't focus on that, right? Like, focus on the other good stuff, like share the love. Kumbaya, okay? Share
That's such great advice. I love that, to really watch how you're communicating with others. And are you pointing out the good, or are you pointing out only the challenges? And something that came to mind too, as you were saying that, is like, oftentimes, news tends to be negative because it's news. If the average thing is normal or happy, it doesn't get pointed out. It's the challenges that get pointed out. And that often ends up being how we describe our day to others. We talk about the challenges, but why not flip that script and decide, in my interactions with others, when I share about my day, I'm going to choose to share about the positives, so that that becomes contagious. Let's all talk about the positives and focus less on the negatives.
I'll never forget one time I was in, and we all have them on campus. We all know the negative Nellies, which, like I said, validate people. Tell them, oh my gosh, that sounds tough. But then minimize your exposure. Like, oh gosh, that sounds tough. I hope your day gets better. Got to go, right? Like, bounce. But when you're sitting and there's that, I'll never forget one time there was always the teacher, no matter what you did, it was competition. If one teacher had this kid, well, my kid was this, like, kind of like, who could have had the worst kid, the worst this, the worst that. So one day she came in, she was just complain about a kid. Was giving me a stomach ache. And I said, it sounds like that child's really, bothering you today. Yeah. And I said, it sounds like you need a break for them. And she was like, yeah. And I said, then why did you bring them to lunch? Right? Like, they're sitting at this table with us pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, if you really needed the break, why are we regurgitating it? It's not helpful.
That's good food for thought. I like that.
Right? Like, guess what? That kid will still be annoying in 20 minutes and we could eat our lunch just fine without, dealing with it. Like, give yourself a break. So, yeah, it's just a habit. Complaining is a habit.
Yes. And choosing the positive is also a habit. So let's choose that habit.
Yeah.
Well, this was such a wonderful conversation. I think these habits are going to be really helpful to our community. How can our listeners connect with you after this episode?
So pretty simple. My website is gracestevens.com. That's Stevens with a V. I have courses, I have books. You can find it all on there. But there's also a free video masterclass training on this topic. And so if you go to gracestevens.com/happy, it'll be right there. And I think that's a great place for people to start to get into my world. And then it comes with resources and other stuff that I get to people. I think actually one of the first things I send people if they sign up on my list is actually that planner that I talked about that you can write your happy thoughts and all that thing. Just something to slip, just a digital copy they can print out and slip it in your lesson plan book, right? Put it somewhere where you'll find it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that's it. And then I do myself in a few months, I'm going to start my own podcast. It's been not a lifelong, but a long time coming dream called Empower Ed. And so hopefully maybe people can look and see if that ever got off the ground by the time this airs, but hopefully pretty soon. So
wonderful. We'll link all of those in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
I enjoyed it so much and I love your mission, 100% behind it. And really, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much valuable information, such useful habits. And if you're listening to this when the episode is coming out, which is in September, and that is back to school here in Canada. I know in the States, some of you have already been back for a little while. And I mean, wherever you are in the world, it could be totally different. But I do believe this is such a good reminder of just like healthy habits to create at the beginning of the school year and to maintain throughout the school year. So for show notes and for all of the links to all of the things that they talked about during the interview, you can go to www.educalm.com/TBE167. That's for the Balanced Educator, episode 167. And Educalm is spelled EDUCALME. Again, that's www.educalm.com/TBE167. Now, it being the beginning of the school year, at least where we are from, don't forget, if you have not signed up for the Educalm free trial yet, to do that. That is 5 weeks of social emotional learning and mindfulness for your classroom. A great way to a lot of the stuff that was talked about during this interview to kind of create these habits with your students in the classroom as well, right? Having that daily mental hygiene routine is just so healthy for all members of the class. So to get on the free trial. And if you are already signed up for the free trial and you used it last year, it never expires. So use it again this year. You can go to educalm.com. That's www.educalme.com, and you will see a link to the free trial right away. You can sign up, no credit card required, easy peasy. So that is your exit ticket for today to start the school year strong, both in your own habits and with your students using the Educalm free trial. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend or a colleague that would get value from it too. Sharing is caring. And on that note, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Have an awesome week. Have an awesome back to school. Have an awesome month.